Hey everybody, Evan Abnett from US Task. I put together this video to inform people about the new law that's come out, that's SB760, which regulates private security officers. This applies to both contract and in-house security. So any business that has its own security officers that work directly for the property, this will apply to you. The only exception is bars that have unarmed security officers or bouncers, so to speak. But this will apply to HOAs, apartment complexes, businesses, any kind of business, cannabis dispensaries, any place that has its own security personnel that work directly for the property. So we're going to jump right into it. Just a quick disclaimer, we're not attorneys. I'm not an attorney. So, always review information before making decisions, especially about legal aspects with a bona fide attorney. This is just for informational purposes only. So we talk about who we are, the background of SB 760, new requirements, the challenges, and highlighted law. We're going to go through the actual law itself. So who are we? We are a licensed private security and investigation agency here in Maryland. We've been around since 2012. We also do a lot of security consulting work, do a lot of detective work, so on and so forth. We're considered a premium security provider, which means that we provide a lot of training to our personnel and therefore have a higher standard than some other providers that you may have had experience with. Our instructors are MPTC certified, or MPCTC certified, I should say. That's the Maryland Police and Corrections Training certification. So we provide active shooter prevention, armed robbery prevention. We provide armed and unarmed security officers. We do PI stuff and so on and so forth. We specialize in cannabis industry since it started in Maryland, and also we provide a lot of security for HOAs and apartments and so on and so forth. So we're A+ rated with the Better Business Bureau. Just a little background on myself. I worked 15 years prior in law enforcement, 30 years prior to security work. Went through SWAT school, a certified protective detail specialist. I worked at the U.S. State Department down in D.C. prior to going to the Salisbury City Police and then the Wacomico County Sheriff's Office. So the background on SB 760, for years, Maryland security officers, Maryland security guards didn't require any training whatsoever. So any security guard that either worked in-house or worked for a security company, there was literally no training that was required. This has changed recently, and we're going to discuss it in terms of how it applies to you. But essentially, any armed security that worked for a contract company was required to take only a 16-hour armed class to carry a handgun. That was for the handgun permit requirement, but there was no really additional training. So there were several incidents in Baltimore City, including security officers, that included alleged unjustified shootings, which prompted SB 760. Some at bars. Also, national police reform also prompted this new law. This is just a little background on some of the incidents that occurred on March 20th, 2023. Security guard shot a man overnight after an altercation at Fells Point near a bar. 2022, November 7th, security guard fatally shot a man who the security guard said threw a brick at him. And on February 3rd, 2023, a security guard shot a person which was deemed justified in a supermarket. So these are the new requirements in a nutshell. So all security staff, again, this applies to contractor or in-house security, meaning you hire people to provide security for your particular location, not a contract security company. They're going to have to undergo 10 hours of initial training. This training has to be certified by the Maryland Police and Corrections Training Commission. For renewal, they're going to have a minimum of 8 hours of in-service training. All armed security personnel must have a handgun permit regardless of in-house. So it used to be if you had in-house security that was on your property and you gave them permission to carry a firearm, They didn't necessarily have to have a handgun permit because that's changed. Okay, so all security officers in Maryland are going to have handgun permits if they're armed. Doesn't matter what title you give them. So it doesn't matter if they're called courtesy patrol or a door person or what have you. If they're providing a security function, then they must be licensed and certified as a security guard. This means that they have to have a Maryland security clearance card. This is an operation that they have to get fingerprinted. They have to send the application in with payment, or you have to send it in for them if you're the property owner with payment, as well as photographs. This is essentially a background check. Prior to that, they have to take the required 10-hour training. Again, the training has to be certified by MPT-CPC, and as a property owner, you have to carry a minimum of $500,000 security liability. If you have under 5 security employees, doesn't matter whether part-time, full-time, whatever the deal is, you have a total of under 5 security officers, you have to carry a minimum of $500,000 security liability. If you have over 5 security officers total, you have to carry at least $1 million. Typically, they can't be 1099 security contractors. So if they're in-house, they're in-house. They have to be W-2'd. Again, this doesn't apply to bars or pubs. If it's an unarmed security person, if the security person in that bar or pub is armed, then they're going to have a handgun permit, and they're going to have a Maryland security guard card, okay, or Maryland security clearance, and take the aforementioned classes. So what are the challenges here? So not all your security that you have working for you now may meet the requirements, especially the background check, right? So let's say that you have a security officer that's working for you or has worked in-house for you for a number of years, and that security officer has a theft or something of that nature in their past, a theft conviction or something of a domestic conviction or so on and so forth. Maryland State Police may not approve their application. If their application is not approved, then they have to be separated from employment or assigned to some type of different activity at your business. You essentially can't hire people off the street. So I know a lot of places in Ocean City hire, their own security guards for just the summer or what have you. Essentially someone that, they put out an ad for a security guard. They can't just hire somebody anymore. That security guard has to have certified training. They have to be licensed by the Maryland State Police, so on and so forth. You must make sure that their training is kept current. You must carry liability insurance, and the property is liable for non-compliance with criminal and civil penalties. So if you don't follow these regulations, you are going to be liable in case something happens. Additionally, use of force reports have to be submitted to the Maryland State Police if there are any use of forces, and we'll talk about that a little later. So how will this affect my security team? Like I said, you're going to have to manage accreditation of staff. You're going to have to stay on top of it. You're going to have to maintain certification of weapons carried, pepper spray, baton, and handgun permit. If they're carrying a firearm, it's highly, highly recommended that they carry something that is an intermediate use of force. So, pepper spray, baton, what have you. There's something called the use of force continuum in police and security work. And basically at the lowest level of the use of force continuum is officer presence, right? So just for instance, you're traveling down the highway, you look in your rear view mirror, you're doing 75 and you see a police car in your rear view mirror. What do? You slow down. Okay, that's a result of officer presence. Not technically a use of force, but it is in a use of force continuum. Okay, so that doesn't work. The next level of force is verbal commands. Leave, so and so forth. Okay, calm down, have a seat, whatever the deal is. That doesn't work. Your next use of force is soft hand control tactics. They're basically escort holds and escort moves to get a person to clear an area. That doesn't work. Then you're graduating to a less lethal option. So it's usually pepper spray. That doesn't work. Then you're graduating to hard hand control tactic that strikes. That doesn't work. Now you're graduating towards semi-lethal. Okay, so that's your baton or taser or what have you, depending upon where the taser falls in your use of force continuum. That doesn't work. Then you have your lethal force or your handgun. So officers can't skip up and down. They use the force continuum as necessary. So obviously, if there's an active shooter, right, the officer's not going to arrive and try to talk down the active shooter, right? They're going to go directly to lethal force, right? But the main thing here is that security and police officers have to be able to slide up and down that use of force continuum rapidly. So let's say that a security officer comes in contact with a person who is, going after someone else with a crowbar. It's a potential use of deadly force incident, right? So they draw their firearm, but then the person drops the crowbar. Okay, now it's not a deadly force incident anymore, but the person's still aggressive and coming toward the security officer. So that person, you obviously can't use lethal force on that person, so that the security officer has to be able to slide down that use of force continuum and go to a less lethal option like pepper spray or what have you to protect him or herself. So the reason why I bring this up is because if you're employing security on your property and they're only carrying a handgun, as in some dispensaries, this is extremely extraordinarily bad because in the use of force continuum, basically they're going from verbal commands to lethal force. Okay, maybe soft hand control tactics or strikes to lethal force, and that's very problematic. So they have to have or should have an intermediate use of force. The reason why I bring this up is because if you're a property owner or management of a property and these people work directly for you, then it's incumbent upon you to maintain their certifications in these different things, right? So again, every security officer is going to have to attend training. You'll have to submit licensing applications. You'll have to obtain liability insurance, and you'll have to file use of force reports. We already talked about that stuff. Okay, so what are the current challenges? Well, currently there's no direction on how to receive training or who will offer it. Typically, MPCTC has certified instructors like myself teach classes for either police officers, corrections, or special police officers, and that's how it's been historically. Now, with this new law coming out, it's unknown whether they're going to have some type of online training course that's going to be accredited or what have you, or it's going to be actual physical instructors are going to have to be certified, but they're going to have to receive that. But there's no direction currently on that. It's currently unknown how the people are going to, security officers or management, really it's the management's responsibility, are going to submit use of force reports. So those use of force reports are supposed to go to the Maryland State Police Licensing Division. There's no mechanism for submitting that exists right now. There is a general lack of understanding about Maryland SB760. A lot of people don't know about this law. And it's critical that you and others know about this law because if an incident takes place, the first thing they're going to do, if it involves a security officer, is check to see whether that security officer is licensed and compliant, and you're compliant as the property owner with these new regulations. Currently, there's a general lack of staff at the MSP licensing division and MPTC. So MPTC or MPCTC typically, only handles police and corrections and now special police accreditation. So now they're getting all this stuff thrown onto them. Same thing with Maryland State Police Licensing Division. So anticipate a logjam of applications going to these guys. So, if you don't comply, what happens if you don't comply? Well, that equals liability. Are the police going to go out and check every business in Maryland? More than likely not. But if an incident occurs on your property and a security officer is there and that security officer handles the problem, whether there's a use of force or not, or whatever happens, or there's a complaint, the first thing that's going to happen is more than likely MSP is going to pay you a visit to see if you're in violation of these licensing regulations. And secondly, what's going to happen is if a good defense attorney gets a hold of this, or a good civil attorney gets a hold of this, they're going to see that you didn't take the proper precautions and proper training for your security personnel. So, that's a serious problem. The other thing is if you own a property and you have your own in-house security, make sure that you have something in your policies and procedures that regulates your security officers. So it should spell out exactly what kind of security officers, what their qualifications need to be, what their training requirements are, and a use of force. So, even if you say that our security officers never touch anybody, that's fine, but that should be reflected in your policies and procedures security section. And what happens if they have to touch somebody, right? So there's always possibilities that they're going to go, unfortunately hands-on with somebody. What happens if some mentally unstable person comes onto the property or so and so forth? So, that all has to be taken into account. So let's look at the benefits and issues with in-house security. So nice benefits of in-house security is you can choose your own people. Obviously, you can hire whoever you want. It tends to be less expensive than contract security. You can make sure that they follow your policies and procedures, and they answer directly to you. Problem with in-house security is that recruiting. It's very hard to recruit qualified security personnel. You may have a lack of policies and procedures, and you may have a true lack of understanding of how security is supposed to work. And I don't say that as the insulting, aspect, but this is a very complex industry, believe it or not, if it's done correctly. So, the biggest thing is if you're operating an in-house security agency or in-house security force, it's a good idea to hire a security consultant like us, US Task, or others to come in and help you navigate some of these issues. You might run into professional or unskilled labor. Again, you're going to have to maintain records and licensing, and there's enhanced direct liability. Since these security officers work directly for your property, you're their employer, so therefore, you have a direct liability of what they do, right? So some of the benefits and issues with contract security. Your security company, your security guard company should handle all certifications, training, uniforms, and staffing requirements. Nice thing about it is you don't have to worry about any of that. Okay, that's the responsibility of the security guard company. The security guard company answers to you. If there's a problem, you call them up with a complaint. Hopefully they'll take care of it. They're required to maintain a level of professionalism because if not, you can get rid of them, right? You can end your contract. They handle the problems and complaints. So if you have a problem or a complaint or someone has a complaint, the complaint comes back generally on the security company. They should handle the extended training requirements that are required in in-service training. So the problems with contract security is it's a very get what you pay for industry. So even though you might be looking at you want to hire some security company at $25 an hour, $30 an hour, understand that what's built into that cost is training or lack thereof. So for instance, with our company, we give our personnel a wealth of training. So they have, first of all of our training is certified, but they have handgun permit training, they have in-service training, they have to qualify at least once every 6 months, usually once a quarter. Our security officers get use of force, force de-escalation, as well as civil liability, criminal liability, how to handle people, so on and so forth. And all this stuff adds up that is not, obviously billed directly to the client, but it's built into that cost. So the more cheap security company that you get is not going to have those. That you're going to get a cheaper service, obviously, right? So there is vicarious liability, and what I mean by that is if the security officer that works for a contract security company does something that is illegal or unethical or civilly actionable, the first thing you're going to look at in terms of a civil case against your property is, did you do your due diligence in checking the security company? So always check to your contract security company has a valid license. If they don't have a license, don't touch them. If they've got a license, go on to the Maryland State Police website, their security guard division, and send them an email asking whether the company is still licensed. There have been cases where security companies, so-called security companies, are doctoring licenses and submitting them. Check to make sure their COIs are correct, okay? Certificate of insurance. Make sure their COIs are accurate. So a lot of times security companies will submit a COI that is a general liability policy but doesn't cover security operations. It has to be coded as such. So make sure that they have a valid COI. Call their insurance company. There have been some so-called security companies, again, that go on a PDF editor and just fake a COI. So just be careful about that. We already talked about guys carrying defensive weapons and firearms with no training. Bear in mind, if you have a person that's working on your site that just has a firearm, again, that's problematic. And if they are armed, make sure that they have the right holster. So, a simple holster, a Class 1 holster, is not going to retain that firearm if someone tries to take it away from them. Class 2 is a little better. They really should have a Class 3 holster, okay? If you're dealing with large companies, they may be difficult to contact. So at 3 o'clock in the morning when you have a problem and you're calling your account rep, more than likely they're not going to answer the phone, and it might take a week to get back to you. So make sure that whatever contract security company you have is going to be responsive to your needs. So when does this take effect? Well, this takes effect June 1st, 2024. Very important that you take you pre-plan for this in order to get your ducks in a row, because you don't want to wait until next summer for this to happen. If you need to contract security personnel and you don't want to provide the training yourself and you don't want to go through all that hassle, then that's something that you need to start thinking about now. Okay, so this is the actual law that was passed. This is Senate Bill SB760. Again, this isn't into effect. So I made some notes in here. This is going to tell you basically what we already talked about, but this is going to be, very specific. So right here, it's advising, regardless whether the individual is described as a security guard, watchman, or private patrolman by other title, they are a security guard. If the employee of a security agency and provides security guard services to another person on behalf of the security guard agency, or is an employee of the security guard employer, okay, so that would be in-house security, and provides security services to the security guard employer, right? This is what defines a security guard. So security guard means a person who employs security guards only provides security guard services to that person or business, okay? So that does include businesses. This does not include, like I told you, bars, taverns, or restaurants that hire unarmed security officers. This section here basically talks about what needs to happen in order to get this person a license, and that they need to apply for a security clearance card through the state police. Okay, so the security guard can work if an application has been submitted to the Maryland State Police. They don't necessarily need that security clearance card, but an application does have to be under process or submitted. Okay, this is the section that's limiting what crimes is going to invalidate a security officer. So basically, if they're subject to certain crimes, then they're not going to be, or if they've committed certain crimes, they're not going to be able to get a security clearance card. This is the requirement for training. Again, it's 12 hours for initial training, and it's 8 hours of in-service. Okay, by the way, if they carry a badge, the badge has to be approved by the Maryland State Police. Okay, you can't just carry any old badge. This is the training program that it specifies what it's going to have to include. It has to include relevant criminal law, the appropriate use of force, alternatives to force, use of de-escalation techniques, promoting appropriate interactions with individuals who are under the age of 18, juveniles, obviously, and people that have behavioral health problems or are in crisis. Okay, and again, this goes on. It's 12 hours in service and 8 hours, or excuse me, 12 hours initial and 8 hours in service. This specifies the liability amounts that I talked about in terms of insurance: $500,000 if under 5 security officers, and $1 million if over 5 security officers. Okay, and this specifies when it takes effect. So if you have any questions, comments, or or concerns about this, please reach out to me. I'll put my email address and phone number up there. Just understand that obviously I'm not the licensing agency. I'm not the Maryland State Police. So therefore, those types of questions are going to have to be directed to them if it's a concern that I can't answer. But I hope this has shed some light on what is coming. Again, get your ducks in a row now so that you're not caught behind the 8 ball. Thanks for tuning in.